Looks like it just turned 11 o'clock. Good. Is it afternoon? It's afternoon some places. It is morning still to here and to the west. My name is Greg Chambers, and I'm coming to you live and direct from GoLeads worldwide headquarters in Omaha, Nebraska. And today we're going to be talking about the latest topic in our ongoing lead generation series of webinars. And this one is, we're talking about Adwords, which has changed. So we could probably start right with that. Today we're going to talk about, I'll introduce myself, we'll talk about Adwords and how that's now Google Ads, and about 10 things you can do right now inside of your own Adwords campaigns if you're doing them or not doing them, or if you're super successful, you'll find a few hints in here. If you're not as successful, you'll probably find more hints as to what you can do right now, and then we'll wrap everything up. Before we begin, there's the chat box. If you have the chat function in the Zoom interface, Nui is going to be helping me monitor that. So I will put, let's see, all panelists and attendees. So I can see what some of the chats are, but she is going to be monitoring all of it. And then there's a Q&A box where you can put in questions, which are, I think they're anonymous. And so I'll be able to answer the questions. So I have this open question piece that we keep open on the side where any questions can be asked. And if you have a burning question that you are attending this webinar hoping to have answered, it may be easiest if you just shove it in right now, because sometimes in these 10, I think it may be actually 12 things you can do right now, but inside these 10 to 12 things, I don't know if I will necessarily answer your question, but I will try. So let's jump into the presentation. So this is my in the news note to start things out, and that's Google Ads has arrived, so it's so long Adwords. And really, this is a branding change that Google has done. So I haven't seen any change on the back end other than with the interface. There is a bunch of changes. There was a change to our partner interface. There was a change to a few other reports. They've been building a new interface that we've been messing around with for about a year. It has almost everything that I used to use in it. It's got a few things where it's been hard for me to find, but for the most part, like all changes, it's a little hard to go through when you're going through it, but on the other end, it seems to work maybe a little bit better. The one change I did note, and I'll actually be covering that today, is the more that machine learning, artificial intelligence becomes part of day-to-day life, Google is trying to help us with that. And so that could be a good thing. In my case, let's see, 2 months ago, it was not a good thing in that it took one of my campaigns and really increased the spend to the point where it was far beyond what we expected, and there were zero results because the machine was learning off of, I don't think there was enough information in there for the machine to get smarter. And I'll be darned if Google, they're just, at times they can be really hard to deal with as they're a giant company. And what was a lot of money to us was not necessarily a lot of money to them. So let's get into 10 ways that we can help that you can get more from your AdWords campaigns. And the very first thing is, with most Google AdWords campaigns, either before you get started or if you're troubleshooting, it really helps to work backwards from where you're at today. And so what I mean by that is, if we can start with our idealized future as to what it is that's that we're trying to achieve, it's a lot easier to make plans along the way inside of your AdWords campaigns. It's no different. The challenge is most people, we jump into AdWords and start trying to build a campaign with a vague idea of what we have in mind. So the basic questions, especially if people have never used AdWords before, or if they tried and it didn't work so well, is how much is it going to cost, and how long is it going to take? And a lot of that really depends on what it is you're trying to accomplish, right? So how do you define success? So if we have, is it going to be number of new customers that are coming in? I mean, ultimately that would be a great indicator. Is it going to be at a particular average sale? Because sometimes we see that some of the leads we generate may be lower than our average sale, and we need to kind of have that in mind before we get there. What is our cost per acquisition going to be? It would be nice to have an idea of that. And we have some tools that help with that help you determine those things. Cost per acquisition, for instance, is really how much are you willing to pay if somebody just showed up with a piece of business. And if we could take that dollar amount. So I was working with the company. They were saying, well, we don't really know what we should be using for a cost per acquisition. And then through the course of questioning, we find out that they are receiving ready-made leads from a partner, but they didn't really call them leads. They just thought it was partner opportunities. And every time that one of those partner opportunities came through, they owed the other group $3,700. So their cost per acquisition was or is $3,700, right? That would be something to shoot for. Now, in this case, once it was pointed out, the CFO obviously got a little worked up because he was like, we can't afford to be paying that. And I'm like, well, you're paying it right now. But it's a guideline, right? And that's all this is at this point. Our idealized future is nothing but a guideline that we're going to use to align ourselves. The quote of, to a ship without a port, every wind is a favorable wind. I probably butchered that, something along those lines. This is why we need to know where it is that we're going. Because if we have an idea of where we're headed, we can massage the campaigns to get there. And when we build those campaigns, that's really the next piece, is how to build these campaigns. If you've probably seen this before, but it always bears worth repeating. So inside of AdWords, inside of your Google Ads account, there's going to be campaigns. And so each campaign is really divided into multiple pieces. When we are troubleshooting accounts, the reason I bring this up as point number 2, how you structure it as to how to get more out of it, is oftentimes we see ad campaigns that are really more Venn diagrams than individual campaigns. So there's so much overlap that's happening that it's throwing off the spend, and every time we fix something in one ad campaign, the other ad campaign ends up driving new dollar amounts. If you just think of each campaign as as its own dollar amount, right? So if I'm willing to pay $100 a day for a particular campaign, if it's $100 overall, I may be able to split that into 2 $50 campaigns or 5 $20 campaigns, right? Or I could put it all into one $100 ad campaign. So that's the easiest way to think about that. That's where your budget's going. And then inside of each campaign, there are ad groups, because inside of each ad group, if you think of ad groups as where the ad is being shown, the keywords, the ad text, and the landing pages need to align with each particular ad group. So what am I trying to say in all of this is when somebody brings a healthy budget to an AdWords account and they're trying to drive new traffic, because we know it's going to generate traffic. I think Google's internal numbers, they say, oh, it's like 20% of clicks, of searches result in clicks on the ads, something like that, 15, 20%. So we know it's going to generate some traffic from those ads that are being shown. The way we guarantee results is we need to make sure that at the very bottom, the landing page, the final thing that we're asking them to do matches the ad text, right? So if I'm giving away a free book, the landing page better say free book if the ad text says free book. And then the keyword should match everything down the road on that too. One of the hardest parts about troubleshooting campaigns is this. The ad campaign and the ad group are mixed up and they overlap. And so the more you can keep those things separated, as we do negative keywording campaigns, for instance, we'll be pulling out negative keywords, and maybe they don't work for that ad group. Maybe they should go into their own ad group. I see this a lot with competitor ads. People will jump in and say, oh, you know, as we're troubleshooting this ad group and these keywords and this ad text and this campaign, this landing page inside of this campaign, it's not a good keyword for this ad group, but it's still, I think it's a pretty good keyword. I'd like to have a chance to sell like to anybody searching for one of my competitors. Well, the ad should be a little different for those competitors, and they should be in their own ad group, because they will have keywords and the ad text needs to speak to those keywords as opposed to the other one. So make sure your accounts are structured correctly with as little overlap as possible. And again, campaigns are each dollar amount that you're spending up inside. So the money kind of trickles down from the top there in structuring your ad groups. So if the first thing was work backwards from success, the second thing is make sure it's structured properly. So that would bring up the third piece, which is if you have the luxury of doing this, finish the campaign, the thing that your idealized future. If you can finish that on paper before you begin, it tends to help prevent the overlap. And if you can describe it on a piece of paper. So again, if you're only spending $500 a month, it's a little easier to get this done. As soon as you get up into a $5,000 a month spend, everything gets a little more complicated. I get it, but that's also why usually there's no reason to get up to a $5,000 a month spend unless it's been meeting your targets along the way, right? We can learn something from $100, the same that we can learn from $5,000. It's just harder to put the campaign together the more that you're spending. So the more you can get it done on paper or on a whiteboard. I'm looking at a whiteboard right now. We whiteboard almost all campaigns because we're trying to figure out if this is the end result, if we can start down there at number 5, which this is the cost per acquisition that we're hoping for, and this is what we're hoping to accomplish to get that. This is what that goal is, and working backwards all the way up to this is the groups of keywords that we want to have, and the ads that we want to show, and these are the campaign, the overall giant campaigns that we'd like to run those things in. Finishing it on paper is the easiest way to get yourself back on track. So you ask yourself, you say, Greg, I inherited this thing because I've got a campaign in our AdWords groups right now where you can see on the side, it's like a bunch of dead it's a bunch of dead campaigns. What we had to do in the end is we needed to scrape out anything that we thought looked good from those campaigns and create totally new campaigns, ad groups, ads, keyword groups, and landing pages to get everything to work inside there. So sometimes when all else fails, after you've finished it on paper, when you go back in, there's no way to make the old campaign pieces work. So you got to scrap the whole thing and start over again. Usually that doesn't need to be done, but sometimes trying to learn from old campaigns is a challenge. It's better to just start new. The WATCHMEN, I say. One of the bigger questions that we have of all of our clients is Whitney Houston's, which is, how will I know, right? How will you know that something is being successful? Setting up those campaigns, and part of me wishes, oh, and I can do it, when I fly back here and I say that if this is our idealized future and we're working backwards to today, so we know what the end success looks like, along the way, how will we know that we're on track? And this is really the question that we want to have answered. And the way to get that done right is there's going to be leading indicators, right, which kind of point to the future, and then lagging indicators. The lagging indicators are all those things that we've addressed as what success looks like. Leading indicators are the things along the way, right? To be super generic, clicks. How do we know that we're making progress? Well, first of all, we know people are clicking on the ads and we're getting traffic to the place that we want to get. Or maybe it's we have calls, right? There's a lot of our campaigns that we do a lot of business-to-business campaigns, and in those business-to-business campaigns, one of the pieces of data that's on record that we can rely on is we know how many inbound calls come into a company on a regular basis, because we can just go into their IP phones, their VoIP phone reports, and we can pull up, like, here are they get an average of 1,000 calls every single month. Now we're going to start these campaigns. Are we seeing any change to the number of inbound calls that are happening? So that would be a leading indicator that maybe something is happening inside that company. If it jumps up to 1,050, 1,100 over time. And the only change that we've really done is we've added these AdWords campaigns. That's a piece of it. Obviously, the lagging things, by then, the only reason I put this up is because it's a little too late to know. It's how you'll know ultimately that it's worked, right? Because I've got sales qualified leads that I can look at, and I've got sales that are coming in. But really, most of those lagging indicators look into the past and tell me how it worked. Leading indicators are a little harder, but we need to establish some of those so that you know that you're on track before your spend gets out of control, especially if your sales cycle is long. And so more on how we do that, the way to get a track of a lot of this information, clicks, calls, activity that's on the website, is we need to be using tracking code. So I'll make a pitch here for Google Tag Manager or one of the tag management tools from third parties that are out there, which are, instead of having to go into your website over and over again, Tag Manager is a marketer's best friend because we can run experiments without the IT department. We need the IT department to do this, which is put code on our website at the head, put it in the body, and then after we've done that, we can set up a bunch of different triggers inside of the Tag Manager, right? So we can maybe do it on page views, or we can do it on clicks or some other form of user engagement. But now we no longer need the IT department to help us with what it is that we're trying to track. So for instance, on most of our websites, we have phone numbers. Can we find where the phone number is on each page and then set up an on click, which would measure anytime that a click happens on a mobile phone, because when that website gets pulled up on your iPhone and you click on the phone number and it says, do you want to make a call? That is an event that can actually be registered. So the way to set that up, and the easiest way to get it working for you, is make sure that Tag Manager is set up, because then the requests that you have of your IT department go down significantly. And most of the time when you're setting these things up, I always try to tell the IT department, I was like, I don't need it hard coded yet. We're just trying to run experiments. It's one of the reasons why we use WordPress. It's one of the reasons why we use a lot of the tools that we do around here, is because if we're testing something, we just want to find out, is it giving us these leading indicators that it's going to be working? And then once they work, I wish they all work, but let's say 3 out of 10 work. Once we know that those 3 work, then I can get the IT department in so that we can hard code it and we can make it work better over time. So AdWords is heavily dependent on our ability to track, even though it will never be perfect. We'll never be able to track 100% of everything that comes in. If we have an idea of what success looks like, right? Going back to this, do you have a picture of what that looks like? Eventually, along the way, we can use these tools to make sure that we're making progress inside of AdWords. So far, a lot of this stuff I've talked about doesn't really have anything to do with AdWords, right? It has to do with everything that is around AdWords. So let's get into a little bit more about how to use the tool itself. This advice I'm giving you is also not necessarily about the tool and the inner workings of the tool, but as we approach how people make decisions, which is what they use the search engines for, right? Is to research. They research these things. They go, they say, they are made aware of a problem. And how is it that people have solved that problem? So that's research, right? That's recognition of a problem, and then research as to how other people have solved that problem. What are the options that work for me? And what's the best way, now that I've kind of decided on what I'm trying to do, what is the best way to do it in a cost-effective way for myself, right? So if we, using other words for that, what can we use AdWords for as far as when it comes to enlightenment? Up at the very top, those kinds of keywords are probably going to be very non-specific. The good news is that they're cheap. The bad news is that your people are nowhere near making a decision. So in business-to-business sales, we've got some examples of companies that we've worked with that the decision process is 1.5 years, 2 years long. We spend what would seem like a lot of money in the enlighten me type phrases, because what we have to do is catch people as they're discovering this problem and start to educate them. If the bottom of the funnel is buy from Greg Chambers, the best person ever, Up at the very top, it's you might think of getting help for this. The way that you can usually see that is as people go through this My Alternatives and which alternative fits me. Inside that My Alternatives is usually where people start to pick up the language, your language, whatever it is that you use internally to describe this problem. So up at the very top, it may be, I've got, I'm running short on money. My business is running short on money. Moving further down, that's like, oh, that's cash flow. I've got cash flow problems. And then down into options, reporting. If my reporting were better, I may be able to improve my cash flow, right? High level abstraction at the very top. We don't seem to have money to pay for the things we need to pay for. As we get closer to the bottom, a reporting mechanism, outsourcing my accounting, getting reports that are worthwhile to me, that is more that like which solution is going to fit me. And then once I've made that decision, okay, so I do need to find an accountant with a little more financial savvy than the bookkeeper that I have on staff. They need to be able to work with my software, right? I've really decided on a solution on this, and they need to be able to get me a cash flow projection report where I can look ahead. I'm always looking ahead 3 months so that I'm not surprised by any of these expenses anymore. Once I have that, regardless of who led me down that path, I probably go shop it at that time. It just seems like it's the right thing to do. Using a different example, like a car, if at the top it's transportation issues and at the bottom it's Honda Civic, when it comes time to buy that Honda Civic, I may have gone through this whole process to find the right decision, but I'm still going to be looking for the best deal. So competing on those keywords, competing on a Honda Civic, like local Honda Civic dealer near me, is infinitely more expensive on AdWords than it is at the top. And I think this will change over time, especially because the more literature I see coming out of Google, they're saying this too. They're saying, oh, you know what? You can advertise to people up at the top, and then when you catch them, you don't have to show ads in the middle. You can just show ads to them at the bottom. And since you have since they're part of you have a retargeting tag, and you have a smaller audience, instead of targeting everybody who's looking for the Honda Civic, you're just looking for the people that you've talked to before inside of AdWords. We can show those ads, and those are cheaper because the retargeting ads are less expensive than brand new clicks on there. So there are ways around it, and I see them trying to describe this that we figured out a couple of years ago. So more people are going to be doing it, and those top clicks will get more expensive over time. However, if you try to compete at the very bottom, which is people who are looking for your business right now, I'm talking to a guy who we were just talking about annuities and investments, and really wanting people who've already decided that annuities are the right thing for them, and getting those people through. Those clicks are expensive. A lot less expensive are people who are looking at lump disbursements that they need to do something with, which is up near the top. Like, do you have a disbursement coming up from your plan? Is different than yeah, I'm looking for somebody who offers these particular annuities in my area that I can talk to. So hopefully that makes sense. But being able to describe your user's intent and then thinking about keyword groups, right? So an Enlighten Me campaign. So if we think of all of AdWords is at the very top, and then we have an Enlighten Me campaigns. I've got campaigns that are around helping people sort through alternatives. I've got campaigns that are around people who've already decided that our solution would be part of the alternatives that may fit them, and being competitive in there. And then at the very end, people who have decided on our particular solution, campaigns around there. You can see how those how your AdWords ad groups start to look a little different than they might have before, and that leads to troubleshooting and getting through there. Another way to look at this is how is it that we're going to get paid? So there's obviously cash in what we're looking for to get out of these campaigns, but if we go again all the way back to our idealized future, what does success look like at that time? Is it always in sales? Sometimes we can get paid with email addresses. So we have a customer that is really what they were trying to do. Is their sales cycle was so long, they were like, if we could just start to talk to these people long before then, we can get paid in terms of email addresses. So we started thinking about, we changed our currency to email addresses, and that helped with the cost per acquisition for an email address. The same thing with contact information. So instead of just the email address, how much am I paying to actually get the real information that somebody gives me? So if you have me in your database and I am greg.chambers@cox.net, chances are you don't really trust. I don't trust you yet, because that's where all my spam, most of my spam goes. But if you get my company email address, right, gchambers, GoLeadsConsulting.com, we are closer to doing more information. So how are you getting paid inside of that is a way to think about it. Survey responses is maybe a way to get paid. Clicks, impressions, which brings up a good point. So when I think about impressions, I'm going to jump ahead here. In impressions, we always think of this term's rule of 30. So a way to get more from your AdWords campaigns is if you think less in terms of conversions into sales and more in terms of branding. One of the secrets I've always thought inside of AdWords is that this ad gets shown at the top, and whether, even though they say, okay, 20% of people click it, 15% of people, but the rest go to these organic results that are showing below that. What is the value of showing my name, especially if I've written a clever ad that stands out a little bit, up at the top inside of there? The rule of 30 suggests that the more impressions we have of our name in the marketplace, the better known we're going to become over time. The more well-known we'll become over time. So one of the things to watch inside of AdWords is if your keyword bidding is tight, in that there's only people inside of your market that are searching for your terms. Over the years, one of the cheapest things that happens inside of AdWords, because they don't charge you for it, because they only charge you for the clicks, is the number of impressions you can get from those people that are probably in your marketplace. It does require tight keyword groupings, and it does require that you know who your customers are pretty intimately. But branding, so thinking of AdWords in terms of branding exercise is a way to get more out of particular AdWords. This one, I wanted to go back to this slide, tripping on success, because in that planning stage, what this is really talking about is there are always going to be best case and worst case scenarios, and then that trend line of what actually happens. So going forward inside of campaigns, one of the ways that we help ourselves troubleshoot campaigns is we try to make sure that there are, that we understand, we always know what the best case scenario is, but what is the worst case that we're willing to live with before we cut bait on these campaigns. And again, this goes back to that original slide of what does success look like, and along the way, at which point are we going to bail because we can't get to success using these particular tools. The easiest way to do it is to think about it before we get all the way into it. All right, keywords. Where do keywords come from? Google gives you a great tool to find new keywords. Excuse me. And by all means, use it. The tool that we use more internally is, as you have helped us identify things that people will be searching for, we just search for them. So it's old school, but we go right to the tool and search for those particular terms. And I'm looking at two things. One is I'm looking at the bottom. Search is related to whatever it was that I typed in. So in this case, I was thinking about lead gen compass and outsourced B2B lead generation being a term, a way that we might describe that internally. If we think in terms of Google has the advantage of huge numbers. The chances that Greg is going to be able to invent the right term or the right way that that Google is training people how to search, right? Every time you type in a search into Google, what does it do? It starts giving you suggested searches. And how often do you click on the result that starts to pop up? More often, Google would suggest more often than not. And so if they're suggesting these terms, it behooves you to match where they're at. So I could be doing outsourced B2B lead generation, but nobody's actually searching for that. But they could be searching for lead generation companies, B2B, how to outsource lead generation, things like that. By the way, that search down there, how to outsource, the very lower right one, is a classic example, right, of our funnel. Where are they? They're still working on Enlighten Me, My Alternatives. Those kinds of clicks are going to be cheaper. So be aware that those exist and we can get to them. And when we're doing those searches, so outsource B2B lead generation, when I'm looking at it, the way I read it is everything above that says add, if you can see above that red line, that says add. Any result that's above, that's just competition, right? Those are people that are bidding on that same keyword term, trying to help you. But everything below is really, the question is, are these my competitors? Because if they're not, it's probably a term that you're going to want to ignore. So the way we control our ad spend is we spend a lot of time, we spend a lot of time building the campaigns out on paper, but B, we spend a lot of time looking through the actual results. And we suggest that, that you do that too. And one way to get terms that benefits you in two ways is going back to your customers. So you have people in your life, in your business, that have been doing business with you for a while. And when you get testimonials from them, can you please help me describe are you willing to give me a testimonial? You say to them, and they say, sure. What we want to do is lead with this. This is the first question you should be asking, is describe the process you went to before deciding, or went through before deciding. And the reason that you use that language is because that's actually where everybody is going to be in here, right? This is, have them describe this process to you, because the keywords that they use at that time are going to be the same keywords that your future customers are going to use. So that would be another way to generate keywords. Oh, the last thing. So here's my last little hint for you as you're building your campaigns. So, right. So you lay out these complex campaigns, you do it on paper, you do keyword research, you build everything. It comes all the way to where it is that you send your traffic. I'm guessing you're past the point where you send it to your homepage. Don't do that. Send it to a page that relates to the keyword the ad group, and the keywords that you're targeting inside that ad group. This would be an example of, an outline of, this is a great landing page. It has the headline that should match the ad copy, which should match the search term that fits inside of the ad group that you were looking at. It's got a call to action on the side. It's got a safety net call to action on the bottom. Add this. We're getting so much good information from these automated bots that putting a bot on your page, especially one like live chat. I'm not saying live chat. I'm saying the ones that are just that collect responses from people, but they know that they are robots. Those robots will help you design better landing pages, and it's live with live customers. So what is it about? I'd say 5% of visitors actually interact with the bot. And then of that, 50% of them ask a question that the bot is not prepared to answer. And so the Autobot will say, is it okay to collect information to get in touch with you? By then, you've already collected the information that you're really after by using the bots, which is, what was the question that they asked? Because the question that they ask is what you're missing from your landing page. So Drift is a tool. There's a bunch of them if you go out and look right now, because there's competitors that are popping up. But the getting that code, getting it on the landing page, and then learning from it is another quick way to get more from your traffic. So the theme of this was supposed to be, we know at Google Ads will generate guaranteed traffic. How is it that we can guarantee that we get results from it? These are the ways that we came up with that are easiest. One is work backwards from your goal, structure, make sure your campaigns are structured properly to get the most from your spend. finish everything you're doing on paper before you commit dollars to it. Make sure you have your tracking installed, which is those 2 points, the WATCHMEN and tracking. Match your ad groups should mirror user intent. That is the easiest way to get the most from them. Think in terms of change the currency that you're thinking in terms of. It doesn't always have to be actual sales, but what are you willing to pay for any leading indicator up to that point? If we tripped on success, what does it look like? Is along the same lines as how do we know that it's working? Don't lose track of impressions. At the very least, even an underperforming campaign, if you're in love with the keyword phrases, is probably doing you some good and helping you in the marketplace. And then we ended with a few ways to jump up into keywords. So if you have questions, this is when I look up, if you can imagine, I sit here and I just yak into this microphone. I look up and I don't see any questions, but the final one is to chat it up, right? To use chatbots to help generate more content on your landing pages that helps make them better. Get information from your live visitors. We've been wanting that for years. This is the first place where I've noticed that I keep bumping into it. Even though they don't advertise these tools as doing that, people just seem to be more comfortable with picking up the chat robot and asking it questions and knowing that they're really not going to get a response, or maybe seeing if there's going to be a response. So as always, we send our visitors to these webinars some free gifts. The Human Beings Guide to Business Growth is a book that talks about a way to grow your business that is actually not even AdWords related, but just getting your people to help you with awareness in the marketplace, everybody in your company. The Perfect Growth Formula is a way to talk about how to use tools like this. And that's really, it's made to kind of help bridge that sales marketing conversation. If you work inside that framework, the conversations tend to be richer and more fulfilling. And then Lead Gen Compass is the new service that we're launching. So you're familiar with GoLeads. That's how you would have ended up on this webinar. Lead Gen Compass is live now. And actually, I'll be sending an email to everybody in the next day or so to check out the new website. We finally got everything on there. And if you've been attending these webinars, you'll notice that a lot of what it is that we're doing on that website is we're trying to take our own medicine, and it follows those same processes and procedures. Other contact information: GoLeads, Lead Gen Compass, our phone number, info@. If you don't have any more questions, I am clocking in just a few minutes past a half hour. I try to keep these to a half hour, believe it or not. And there's nothing else going on. Thanks for attending. Once again, Greg Chambers. You can reach us 402-334-1824. And if you need help with AdWords, by all means, send a note and we will help you as much as we can.